Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Dr. Paul Myers, and I'm the Director of Research and Development at the Readiness and Emergency Management for Schools Technical Assistance Center, also known as the REMS TA Center. I would like to welcome you to the webinar, Using the 5 Preparedness Missions to Help Ready Your District and School for Emergencies. This webinar will provide a brief history of how preparedness has evolved over the past couple of decades, and will describe and provide examples of the 5 mission areas and how they can contribute to overall preparedness. Participants will have an opportunity to pose questions to today's presenters, both in a question and answer session that follows immediately after the presentation section of the webinar, and also on the TA Center's Community of Practice after the webinar. The webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the TA Center's website via our webinars page, along with an accompanying resource list following this event. Before we start, we have a few brief housekeeping items to cover. The following tips will help ensure you are able to download files, hear the audio, request technical assistance, and ask questions during this event. To download a copy of the presentation slides, use the Downloads box on the right-hand side of your screen. Select the name of the handout or handouts you would like to review and click the Download File button. We'll reference a lot of TA Center resources in this webinar, and the URLs or web page addresses are available in a resource list that can be downloaded using the same steps. As a reminder, there is no dial-in for this webinar. Audio is available via the link provided. If you're experiencing difficulty hearing the audio stream, please turn up your computer speaker volume at this time. If you experience any technical difficulties during the webinar, please contact the TA Center at info@remstacenter.org. You may also request technical assistance using the Q&A tool. Questions are viewable to the moderator only. Finally, to ask a question for the question and answer portion of this webinar, use the Q&A tool on your screen to send your message to the facilitator. Questions will be answered in the order in which they appear, and as time permits following the presentation. If you would like to submit a question and are not able to do so via the box provided by Adobe Connect, please email your questions to, again, info@remstacenter.org. Let's first take a look at the agenda of today's webinar. We'll begin by providing a brief history of emergency preparedness in the U.S. and how the concept has evolved over the past 2 decades. In the second part of the webinar, we'll describe the 5 mission areas in greater detail and provide examples of activities and applicable TA Center resources. In part 3 of the webinar, we will tie everything together and provide an example of how all the mission areas can help a school or district with one specific threat. After the presentation portion of the webinar, we'll move into a question and answer session. Finally, you'll have the opportunity to participate in a Community of Practice, or COP, chat on the TA Center's website. But first, I'd like to introduce my 2 co-presenters today. Madeline Sullivan is an Education Program Analyst in the Office of Safe and Healthy Students, or OSHS, at the U.S. Department of Education. She serves as the Contracting Office Representative for the TA Center. Prior to joining the federal government workforce, Madeline provided technical assistance on pro-social skill development, violence prevention, and school emergency management, after having served as a special educator. Erica Hill is the voice of the TA Center. If you call on our toll-free helpline, it is Erica you will speak to first. She serves the TA Center team as a research assistant, providing support with technical assistance inquiries and other research needs. Prior to joining the TA Center, Erica works with a variety of federal agencies, including the National Library of Medicine, Health Resources and Services Administration, and U.S. Department of Agriculture, conducting research activities related to public health. I support the field as part of the TA Center team through activities such as the creation of resources, including this webinar, trainings and fact sheets, and by providing technical assistance. Before joining the team, I served as the educational and technical lead for both the Preparedness Department of the National Headquarters of the American Red Cross and Save the Children's US programs. Before that, I served as a police constable for the Metropolitan Police Service, also known as Scotland Yard, in England. I'm going to hand things over to Madeline, who will describe how the approach to school and district preparedness has evolved over the past few decades. This information will help provide perspective for how schools and districts can comprehensively prepare for emergencies. Madeline?
Thanks so much, Paul, and welcome everyone on behalf of the Department of Education. Emergency management is nothing new. We've had police, firefighters, emergency medical service providers, public and mental health practitioners for years and years. As you can see, this subject was first formalized in World War II era. In the past few decades, it's become very specialized, especially for the school setting. Building upon lessons learned throughout history, following event after event, we now have frameworks focused on creating effective systems and programs to help promote safety within every community before, during, and after emergencies. These frameworks work to integrate expertise, and they create collaborative working relationships between responders and schools that not only help us to be more prepared, but also facilitate the seamless integration of regional, state, and federal resources depending upon the nature of the incident. That is to say, we now have tried and tested frameworks that keep us safer. As for school emergency management, you are critical. You have the critical expertise. While our police are experts in law enforcement and emergency managers are experts in preparedness, as educators and education officials, you are the experts in your school community. You know and you understand the unique needs of this precious population. You might be familiar with this image we created years ago in 2003, when emergency management was typically thought of as 4 separate phases: prevention mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. Although we have evolved since then, not much has changed. The real change shows in the organization and articulation of what we all do in school emergency management. And with that, the nation has developed additional systems that support preparedness and safety, all of which contribute to improved effectiveness. Beginning in 2011, the approach to preparedness was reorganized to create a new, strong preparedness framework comprised of 5 mission areas. And in 2013, we formally adopted it for schools with our partners. We now think of preparedness in terms of building capacity in each of the 5 missions: prevention, mitigation, response, and recovery. And as you can see, we added protection. It's important to understand how the mission areas are related and interrelated. The goal is to build capacity in each of the mission areas in order to become prepared. For example, the more you address response in advance, the more prepared you'll be in the event of an emergency. Generally, we can align these missions with the 3 time frames: before, during, and after. Before an incident, the majority of prevention, mitigation, and protection activities will be addressed. Response activities typically occur during an incident, and recovery activities usually are initiated after an event. However, there are some critical activities that will not always align with this time frame. Using cybersecurity as an example, as you're responding to an attack, you'll want to take prevention steps to stop any additional possible harm. Another example, using tornadoes as a scenario, teachers can begin psychological first aid, or PFA, as they are directing students to shelter in place. This will hasten the recovery process and likely result in a lessened sense of trauma for many of the individuals. A very important note: if your planning team has been traditionally organized by those 4 phases, don't be alarmed. You're going to learn today during this webinar about the commonalities and the ways you can build on your prior efforts to help ensure safe schools. So in 2013, the Department of Education, Justice, FBI, Homeland Security, FEMA, and Health and Human Services collaborated to provide the best possible guidance to school communities on how to plan for and recover from the many emergency situations they may encounter. So together, all of these agencies, we drew upon our respective areas of expertise, and we created this customized set of recommendations for schools and their community partners. And now each agency is sharing this information with its respective state and local entities to help encourage schools and their community partners to use the same process and same guidance as a common framework. The school guide goes into detail describing the 5 mission areas and the 6-step process for creating emergency operations plans, or school EOPs. You can see our other trainings and resources to learn more about the 6-step process for developing a school EOP. But very briefly, it's in step 1 that the planning team is formed, and in step 2, the team conducts assessments to identify threats and hazards and the resources available to address them. In step 3, the planning team develops goals and objectives to address those prioritized hazards and threats they identified in step 2. Step 4 goes into more detail and goes to creating the annexes that describe all of the activities to be completed. And while Step 5 works to finalize the plan with approval from all parties, it's in Step 6 that the school EOP becomes most dynamic. Here, efforts focus on implementing and maintaining the plan, training stakeholders, conducting exercises, and of course, enhancing the plan or the EOP based on lessons learned. As we evolved into the 5 missions and the 6 steps formula, so did NIMS, the National Incident Management System. This now serves as the single response system used by all disciplines at all levels of government and was adopted by the nation. Generally speaking, NIMS key concepts work to facilitate collaboration and share in preparedness efforts with a focus on response. Using the school setting as an example, Safe Schools is both a mutual goal and a mutual responsibility. Specifically, community partners are all those entities who have a responsibility in planning and responding to school emergencies. Community partners include first responders such as police and firefighters, as well as public and mental health practitioners and emergency managers. So in brief, NIMS uses a core set of concepts, principles, and procedures, processes, standards, and terminology for use when collaborating. And all of these can be supported by schools and used in creating the school EOP. The key components in NIMS focus on building capacity and preparedness and those critical items such as communication, resource management, and command. Which brings us to the Incident Command System. This is one of the critical components of NIMS. In essence, it facilitates a rapid, coordinated, and effective response in the event of an emergency. All first responders use it, and schools should use it as well. This management structure allows for fast and easy integration of personnel, procedures, equipment, and communication if there was ever a large-scale event that had responders from multiple communities or multiple levels of government. The structure is flexible, it's expandable, and it's collapsible, and only the needed tasks or functions are activated. Most importantly, it outlines the management structure for all personnel in the event of an emergency.
Thanks, Madeline. We're now going to move into the second part of the webinar where we'll describe the 5 mission areas in greater detail, how they apply to preparedness in general, and specific TA Center resources that can assist schools and districts as we focus on each area. We'll start with the mission area of prevention. Prevention can be defined as the capabilities necessary to avoid, deter, or stop an incident from occurring. The important piece of this definition is that we want to stop the event from occurring in the first place. The good news is that schools and districts are great at prevention. You already do activities such as providing violence and bullying prevention programs and a safe and supportive learning environment. When it comes to emergency management, we just want to expand that to focus on other hazards and threats that can be prevented. With prevention, we may be able to stop the initial hazard or threat from occurring, as well as cascading or secondary effects, which are additional events caused by the first event. For example, we can prevent students being sent home with the wrong parent or guardian after an incident through effective reunification procedures. Generally, we can prevent human-caused threats such as deliberate fire setting easier than natural disasters. However, some hazards or threats, such as earthquakes and severe weather, cannot be prevented. Districts and schools, therefore, need to focus their efforts on the other areas of mitigation, protection, response, and recovery before, during, and after these events. A couple of examples of prevention activities districts and schools can undertake include preventing the spread of foodborne illness through appropriate cleaning of school kitchens, and applying crime prevention through environmental design principles to school grounds and structures. We're now going to provide a more detailed example of a prevention activity districts and schools can undertake, which is the reduction of targeted violence in schools through the implementation of a threat assessment process. This information comes directly from the TA Center's recently revised TBR titled Behavioral Threat Assessments in Schools, an Introduction. The primary purpose of a school threat assessment is to prevent targeted violence in schools by students, where a school is deliberately selected as the location for the attack and is not simply a random site of opportunity. A threat assessment can also be conducted to determine whether or not students pose a risk to themselves or others. Some schools and districts also expand the process with the goal of reducing other threats such as bullying and fighting. A school threat assessment focuses on what a student is doing and saying, not on what the individual looks like. Also, it identifies and evaluates whether a student poses a risk. A threat assessment can be conducted before an actual threat has been made if a student is seen to pose a threat. The TA Center's school threat assessment process progresses through 5 stages. 1. Initiate the threat assessment. 2. Collect information. 3. Organize and analyze the information. 4. Determine whether a student poses a threat. And 5. Manage the risk. As with the 6-step planning process, the school threat assessment process is intended to be cyclical and ongoing. After the threat assessment team manages the risk in stage 5, the school or district may find that a threat assessment may need to be initiated again, or the threat assessment team may need to continue collecting information. These 2 slides on threat assessments have provided just a sample of the information provided by the REMS TA Center's Training by Request on threat assessments in schools. If you'd like to learn more about the training and how threat assessments can help reduce target violence in your school or district, you can click on the TBR link on your screen. The link will take you to a page with our full list of on-site TBRs and information on how to request the training. In addition, just a few of the other prevention-focused resources provided by the TA Center include archived webinars on bullying prevention efforts and school climate. As with all our webinars, these resources include additional materials such as resource lists and fact sheets. While we've listed these resources under protection activities, they may apply to other mission areas too, such as mitigation, which you'll hear about now. I'll now hand the presentation over to Erica, who will talk about mitigation.
Thanks, Paul. We're now going to focus on the mission area of mitigation. If we can't prevent an emergency from occurring, we can try to reduce its impact on life and property. These activities fall under the mission area of mitigation. Mitigation activities can help make any response and recovery more effective. Examples of mitigation schools or districts can conduct include storing emergency supplies such as food, water, light search and rescue tools for trained staff and students, and supplies for people with disabilities or access and functional needs. Building or identifying safe rooms to keep students, teachers, and staff safe from severe weather, and conducting structural and non-structural mitigation to eliminate or reduce the loss of life and property from threats and hazards such as earthquakes. The next couple of slides will describe these structural and non-structural activities in greater detail as they relate to preparing for an earthquake. Again, this information comes directly from one of the TA Center's PBRs titled Earthquake Preparedness for Schools. Non-structural mitigation can be conducted relatively easily at the district and school levels and usually requires little expertise and fewer resources. Non-structural mitigation activities focus on portions of the building that are not connected to the superstructure. For example, roof tiles can be kept in place with tile clips. Utility systems such as boilers can include seismic sway bracing. Audio-visual technical equipment, lockers, and file cabinets can be secured with straps, and building contents can be secured in cages, on shelving with lips, or secured to a wall. Structural mitigation focuses on building components whose primary function is to support the building and are typically incorporated into the building design and construction. The goal of structural mitigation is for the building to resist the possible earthquake forces it could encounter through appropriate seismic design and construction. In some instances, building and industry codes may not be stringent enough, so performance-based design is needed to ensure that the building will effectively withstand an earthquake's effects. Performance-based design involves designing a building to meet certain performance objectives, such as the need to prevent a building collapse. If the risk from earthquakes is too great, the building may need to be taken out of service and operations moved to a new location. If resources are available, schools and districts may want to first focus on seismically retrofitting the building to reduce the risk, or moving operations to a new location before evaluating and mitigating non-structural hazards, such as a structural collapse, will have a bigger impact than damage and injuries from falling non-structural objects. In addition to the TBR Earthquake Preparedness for Schools, other TA Center resources that can help with school and district mitigation efforts include a podcast on conducting earthquake-related exercises in schools and districts, and a webinar on designing safe schools. I'm now going to hand back over to Madeline, who will discuss the next mission area of protection.
Thank you, Erica. Up until now, we've looked at prevention and mitigation activities. The third mission we'll discuss now is protection. Protection is one of those missions that school staff are enacting all day, each and every school day. Protection activities are those activities that are continually conducted to help safeguard students, staff, and their families. These are activities you are doing to keep them safe from ordinary accidents as well as from threats and hazards such as tornadoes. As educators and education staff, you are entrusted to keep students safe. Every day we see school staff walking the halls, closing those doors that are left open, keeping an eye on students and classes, informally interacting with students in the halls, even reminding everyone to tie their shoes. You work to protect students from intruders by locking the doors, ensuring we have a line of vision to the front door, or using surveillance mechanisms so that we can see and can control who is entering our schools. Some schools even use identification badging systems to further support these efforts. You also work to nurture a safe and supportive school climate and help ensure that each student has at least one positive relationship with at least one trusted adult at the school. And you teach students, staff, and their families what to do in the event of an emergency. Protection activities undertaken by a school or a school district can include establishing rules and policies that promote student safety and reinforce all of those things we do to protect our schools. Training on those possible incidents and emergencies to help ensure a quick and effective response, and conducting exercises to help validate the plan, learn where more work or training is needed, and help strengthen those relationships between our school community and our community partners, such as firefighters and police. As you can tell, these activities can also occur before, during, or after an event. Using training as an example, before an event occurs at a district or school, may provide training to staff and teachers about their roles and responsibilities in an emergency. During an ongoing event, new staffers may need to be provided just-in-time learning on topics such as how the school will communicate with stakeholders and how to use technology platforms. And after an event, certified staff members may need to brush up on their knowledge and protocols about providing emotional support. In the next 3 slides, I'll provide further examples of protection activities. A priority of schools and districts is to protect students and teachers. So policies and procedures can be created for a range of school safety, security, emergency management, and preparedness aspects, such as adult sexual misconduct, or what's also referred to as ASM. This is defined as any sexual activity, physical or not, directed to a child with the purpose of developing a romantic or sexual relationship. You should know that we will be soon releasing a new guidance on this topic, which includes considerations of new technologies and focuses on schools and districts, ensuring they are promoting a culture where adults are protecting children and feel safe reporting concerning behaviors of others to be investigated. There's several ways that this can be done, such as creating policies and procedures that address guidelines for gray areas that are sometimes subject to interpretation, the consequences for violating ASM policies, the legal responsibilities for mandatory reporting of ASM. And it's really important to note that this varies by state law. And on the REMS TA Center website, you can go to our state map and find out the specifics of your state's laws. And also, there needs to be a mechanism in place to allow for safe reporting of possible ASM. School districts and schools should also discuss with their community partners what training they'll provide to students, staff, and teachers, how often, and by whom. Training can be provided in small increments and on specific topics, such as how to respond to specific threats or hazards. The training should vary. It can be broad in nature or long in its delivery. To support effective response, providing training to school staff that is directly related to their roles within the incident command system is critical. So, for example, who will be the incident commander in an emergency, and who will be the backup incident commander? What are her or his responsibilities? These are addressed through planning and training. Training can be tailored to the population. For example, training families and guardians on their roles and responsibilities during response is protective. As we all know, it's unsafe for them to go directly to the school if there's a lockdown. And student training can exceed evacuation and shelter-in-place drills. Team Community Emergency Response Training, or otherwise known as Team CERT, for students in high school can also be provided. This enables students to train directly with staff and community partners, and it enables them to have dedicated roles during response, such as conducting light search and rescue, assisting those who are injured, and helping reduce stress among their peers. Again, the TA Center provides virtual and in-person trainings on topics such as preparing for earthquakes, infectious diseases, food contamination, targeted violence in schools, through threat assessment, and resilience strategies. Then, to determine whether response procedures are appropriate and training has been effective, schools and districts can conduct emergency exercises with their community partners. Exercises can provide experiences in an environment where it's okay to make mistakes and learn from them. Exercises range from the seminars and tabletops to full-scale exercises, wherein tabletops are intended as low-stress discussion that not only enables everyone to further consider possible ways that a scenario may unfold, but also a chance to get to know one another and everyone's roles and responsibilities. Now, full-scale exercises, they work to simulate real-world emergencies and more directly test the procedures with responders, equipment, and actors. These also help ensure everyone is familiar with the school's facilities and its campus, which can help them provide a more effective response if needed to a variety of events. Planning teams should also consider providing training and conducting exercises with their local community partners, such as law enforcement, fire department, and emergency management. This helps ensure school staff, teachers, and students are all familiar with the unique ways to respond to an emergency in their community. So for an example, some of the country law enforcement prefers that all window blinds are closed during a lockdown. In other parts, window blinds are to be kept up. Finally, it helps ensure schools and districts' plans integrate well with local and state plans, which can provide a more seamless response. The TA Center resources that can help schools and districts with protective actions include a web page with an infographic that lists information on state-level related resources related to school safety, security, emergency management, and preparedness, a webinar on cybersecurity, and a publication on what staff need to know about adult sexual misconduct. And now, I'd like to turn it back over to our colleague, Erica.
Thank you. I'll continue the discussion by discussing the response mission area in greater detail. If an emergency has occurred, or we know one will occur, such as in the case of an approaching hurricane, we can put the school's or district's plans into place to effectively respond. These activities, which help meet the immediate needs of students, teachers, and staff, fall under the response mission area. While some pre-incident activities, such as exercises, may have been conducted to simulate an event and the response, this planning will be put to the test in a response to a real emergency. Activities that will likely help in a response include activating the school or district EOP, using ICS to help coordinate the internal response and work with external partners such as first responders, activation of internal response teams such as trained teen CERT and trained light search and rescue teams if individuals are found to be missing, and communication about what is happening internally with groups such as the school district, staff, teachers, students, and families, and externally with first responders and the media. While we are most familiar with responses in school buildings, planning teams also need to determine how students, teachers, and staff would respond to other emergencies when they're in places such as the school bus, on field trips, or studying abroad. All this information can be integrated into the school or district EOP. Examples of TA Center resources that can help with response planning include a Developing Emergency Operations Plans K-12 TBR, a webinar on Teen CERT, and a publication on how schools and districts can better communicate and collaborate in an emergency. Now, back to Paul.
Thank you, Erica. The final mission area that we'll be discussing now is recovery. After a school has experienced an emergency event, it's time to restore the learning environments. To achieve this, schools and districts may need to provide services such as emotional support, which is considered a recovery activity. To help identify all the activities that may need to be conducted in recovery, it's helpful to split overall recovery into academic, physical, fiscal, and psychological emotional recovery, which I'll discuss in greater detail in the next 2 slides. Also, the type and breadth of recovery efforts will likely depend on the size and scope of the emergency event. However, if the event was large enough in nature, such as an earthquake, flooding, or wildland fire, the recovery will likely progress through the time frames of short-term, intermediate, and long-term recovery. Short-term recovery typically occurs in the days following the event. Immediate recovery occurs in the weeks and months following the incident, and long-term recovery can last for years. So, when planning teams are identifying courses of action that may need to be undertaken in a recovery, they may want to keep these in mind, the 4 dimensions and the 3 time frames. I'm now going to mention those in greater detail. So the first is academic recovery. Learning is the primary purpose of schools, and the ability to resume academic activities is essential to a school's recovery. The resumption of academic activities begins to restore normalcy to the school environment, which can be very important in the psychological and emotional health of students. Activities could include changing academic routines, using temporary spaces, or providing alternate educational programming. Physical recovery involves restoring the school's buildings, equipment, and supplies as needed. This could include assessing and repairing damage, cleaning and ensuring transportation and food services continue to be provided to students. Critical business functions of the school or district also need to be restored through fiscal recovery. Activities could include using the services of vendors, restoring payroll and other administrative functions, and registering displaced students in other school districts. The most important component of recovery may be the psychological or emotional aspects. Immediately after an incident, trained staff can provide psychological first aid for schools to students. Students should also be assessed and monitored to ensure they're receiving the support they need. And we can't forget about looking after the caregivers, who need to stay strong so they continue to help others. For more information, the TA Center provides a Resilience Strategies for Educators, or RSC-TBR. The training covers topics such as resiliency and dimensions of compassion fatigue, self-care, psychological first aid for use of adults, and professional and personal self-care plans. Again, click on the TBR link on your screen for more information. Additional resources provided by the TA Center on the topic of recovery include a webpage on psychological first aid, a TBR on resilience strategies for educators, and several online courses. In the third part of this webinar, we're going to show how a focus on all of these mission areas can help with the school's overall preparedness. So, how can we tie this all together? Madeline previously mentioned how districts and schools can plan for a variety of threats and hazards using the 6-step planning process. As the planning team progresses through those steps, and especially as they identify goals, objectives, and courses of action, they may want to keep in mind the 5 mission areas we've just discussed: prevention, protection, mitigation, response, and recovery. One example provided on your screen is how the 5 mission areas can be used to address targeted violence in schools. This slide also comes from the School Behavioral Threat Assessments and Introduction to TBR. So we can prevent targeted violence from occurring by building a positive school climate, protect by establishing clear policies and rules on acceptable behavior and how to report concerns or threats, mitigate by educating students, teachers, staff, and families on what is acceptable behavior and where individuals can turn for emotional support, respond by stopping an incident as it occurs, and recover by supporting students who are considered to possibly pose a substantiated threat to themselves or others. In summary, while the concepts of mission areas may still be relatively new, the actual activities conducted in each mission area are not. Schools and districts have been preparing for emergencies and continue to do so in all these areas, even if the mission area terminology wasn't used. However, as explained earlier, a basic understanding of these mission areas can bring attention to activities and areas that planning teams may not have previously considered. By keeping prevention, mitigation, protection, response, and recovery in mind, schools and district planning teams can more comprehensively plan for a wide range of threats and hazards. Still, we know some emergency management concepts and terminology can be a little confusing, especially for folks who are new to this field. So, in a few minutes, you'll have the opportunity to pose questions to the webinar presenters in Adobe or in the TA Center's community of practice. If, after today, you have questions on this topic or any other, we encourage you to contact the TA Center with any requests at info@remstacenter.org or through the toll-free number 1-855-781-REMS, which is 7367. The TA Center's hours of operation are Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Call us and you'll get to speak to Erica directly. You can also reach us by submitting an online TA request form. As you've probably noticed, we really encourage you to reach out to us if you need assistance. So just a few of the more recent topics we've provided support on include planning for an active shooter incident at schools, creating a plan to address emergencies involving school buses, and policies, procedures, and protocols regarding school security cameras and video surveillance. We also encourage you to visit the TA Center website for additional information about TA Center resources, such as the school guide, community of practice, virtual trainings, and on-site TBR trainings. Now we're going to move into the penultimate module of today's event, which is a question and answer session. As a reminder, to ask a question, use the Q&A tool on your screen to send your message to the facilitator. You can also email us at info@remstacenter.org. Questions will be answered in the order in which they appear and as time permits. So we've received a question asking about what would be the REMS recommendation for school safe rooms. That's a great question, and I think Madeline, do you want to start addressing this?
Sure. As for the specific recommendations for staterooms, that is a topic area where we work with FEMA, our community partners. They're the experts in that, and it's come out in a recent publication on mitigation. So I encourage you to submit that very same question to the REMS TA Center, and we will reach out to them and get their latest guidance on the specifications.
Thank you. And another question here, what REMS resources would provide the most information about the 5 mission areas? Which is a great question. I think there's one resource that we provide, or a type of resource that we provide, that covers a lot of different topics and themes. It's basically what we're listening to now is the webinars and other online trainings. So if you go to the REMS TA Center's website, at the very top you can click on technical assistance and then virtual trainings. And there's a variety of different online courses and webinars on just a whole host of different activities. So I'll just read off a few right now. So we talked a little bit about earthquakes, so integrating earthquakes into school emergency operations plans, incorporating sextortion into school EOP planning, use of social media and school behavioral threat assessments, continuity of operations planning, designing safe schools, planning and retrofitting for safety in educational facilities. So that's just a handful of the resources that we provide. If you have time and want to go and check out all the webinars, there's a really long list that you can go through. Each webinar, as we mentioned earlier, includes accompanying resources, such as a resource list and also a fact sheet, possibly. All of them about an hour long, so you can go there and just listen to the webinars in your own time, and stop and pause and do other activities if you need to, and come back and listen to those. But those are a great starting place if you want to get a real breadth of information about the different mission areas. And let me find another question. If I wanted to share information about the preparedness missions with my staff, what resources should I give them? Obviously, excuse me one second while I just take a drink of water.
Do you want me to take over for a moment, Paul?
Yes, please do, yeah.
Sure. So, well, following this webinar, you will have at your access a PDF of this, and you're welcome to take that and share it in full or share it in parts, and you're also welcome to use it. So, for example, you could present one mission at a time at the beginning of one of your staff meetings and such, and then we will also be further populating our website, so shortly there'll be some more resources dedicated to the 5 missions.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And we have another question here. The recommendations for locations of panic buttons. Again, another good question. Madeline, do you want to answer that, or would you like me to?
I'm happy to answer it. Thank you, Paul. So it's not, I'm not trying to dismiss your question. I say this with great sincerity. It's really important for you to have that discussion with your community partners and following a walkthrough of each individual school building. So it's going to be, that decision is going to want to be customized to the building. So where would it be located depends upon its distance from the person who would be activating it, and perhaps maybe there'd be opportunities for more than one. So you want to ensure that line of vision. There's a number of considerations. And so you really want to work with the local law enforcement to engage a number of strategies and together determine what would work best for each building.
Thanks, Madeline.
Paul, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think that's a great summary, and I think, as we mentioned earlier, a great resource for specific questions about school safety, security, emergency management, and preparedness is requesting technical assistance. As we mentioned, there's a few different ways of doing that. Calling us, there's an online submission form, or emailing us, and detailed questions like that. It gives us a great opportunity to really dig into latest research and best practices and lessons learned to provide more detailed responses. So real specific questions like that, this is what the TA Center is here for, and we encourage folks to send us their questions. It might seem really small, it might be a really big question, but we're here to help, and that's what we do. So if in doubt and you're running out of options to try and find an answer, please do contact us, email, submission form, online, and we'll try to get a response to you as soon as we can. Depending on the complexity of the question, it might take us a few days to respond. It might take us a week or two, or even longer, depending on how complex the question is. But when we do respond, unless it's a really simple question like where do I find something on your website, if it's a more detailed question, we'll send you back a PDF. It could be a page, it could be 5 pages long, which includes resources, federal guidance, other recommendations. So again, please reach out to us. These are great questions, and if you have these after the webinar, please do reach out to us, and we'd love to help you where we can. Eric, are you aware of any other questions at this time?
No, I am not.
Okay, everybody. So let me just move on to the next slide here. So thank you to everyone who's posted a question. We're now going to move into the final part of the event where participants have the opportunity to continue the conversation in the TA Center's Community of Practice. We've started a new forum on our Community of Practice to discuss this topic in more detail. We'll encourage you to post questions like you have been doing today to the REMS team or your colleagues, or to share resources. To access the forum, log into the Community of Practice, and the login button is available at the top of our website. You can also access the Community of Practice by clicking the link on your screen. Once you've logged in, you can access the forum, which is the REMS TA Center Preparedness web chat. I'll say that again. The REMS TA Center Preparedness Missions web chat. If you have any questions accessing the forum, feel free to email us again at info@remstacenter.org. We'll be live on the Community of Practice